Alrighty. For my lesson, I chose to talk about multiple disabilities. Alright, so the federal definition of multiple disabilities gives two examples of possible combinations of disabilities: intellectual disability and blindness, and intellectual disability and orthopedic impairment. So the idea of multiple disabilities is intellectual disability has to be one of the two, while the other one can be some form of orthopedic impairment or blindness. All right, so intellectual disability is a disability that affects the acquisition of knowledge and skills. And for this lesson, I'm going to be focusing on orthopedic impairment and intellectual disability. So the definition of orthopedic impairment is a disability relating to a bone, joint, or muscle. All right, so the most common form of orthopedic impairment is cerebral palsy, which is a disability that affects a person's ability to move, balance, or maintain posture. Causes of cerebral palsy is due to the abnormal brain development, often before birth. And some symptoms include exaggerated reflexes, floppy or rigid limbs, and involuntary motions, and these appear in early childhood. 1 in 2 people with cerebral palsy also have an intellectual disorder. So half of people diagnosed with cerebral palsy have multiple disabilities because they also have an intellectual disorder. So that's why I'm focusing on cerebral palsy when I'm talking about multiple disorders. All right. So some early signs of cerebral palsy include delays in reaching development milestones like sitting up or crawling. They have muscle spasms, weak arms or legs. They seem too stiff or too floppy, and they have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. So those are often signs that you see in early childhood for people with cerebral palsy. And then some other signs include feeding, drooling, and swallowing difficulties, problems with speaking and communication, and that could include just they're hard to pronounce words or make certain sounds and be able to say words or use grammar properly. They have random, uncontrolled movement, and it often includes a learning disability. All right. So these are just a couple of special education services that can help a student with cerebral palsy that also has intellectual learning disability. This isn't all of them, but this is a couple. So you can do some one-on-one assistance or a peer tutor, specialized learning devices / adaptive equipment. So that's just like things that can help them speak or can help them move, like standers to help students in wheelchairs stand for a certain amount of time during a day. They'll put them in a stander. And then there's also, they can read their assignments and questions out loud to them, have extended time on tests or assignments. Someone needs, if they can't feed themselves, someone needs to be provided to feed them during lunchtime. And then life skills class and physical therapy during school as well. All right, and then here's just a couple of tips for general education teachers. Most importantly, to get to know their needs and understand them as a student. Have assigned seating, so especially if they're in a wheelchair, so it's easy for them to know exactly where their spot is and to get to that spot, and often have that spot next to a door so they can not have to go in between a bunch of desks in order to get to their assigned seat. Make the classroom physically accessible, so make it easy for them to move around the classroom, especially if you're doing lots of group work, lots of moving activities, because they always want to be involved. Communicate with their parents for any special needs that they might need, or with their progress, or with advice that their parents might have for them. And practice collaborative teaching. So talk with their other teachers and communicate with them and see what's working for them, and tell them what's working for you so you can better work your lessons in your classroom to fit the needs of that student. For my example, I wanted to talk about my brother Jordan. So this is my older brother Jordan. He was born with cerebral palsy, but he also has intellectual learning disabilities. So in his IEP, he was labeled as a multiple disability. He is now 29 years old, but some early signs, he was diagnosed cerebral palsy when he was 7 months old. So some early signs that my parents especially noticed were things like him not being able to sit up. He was very difficult to get to fall asleep. He was often agitated and had difficulty staying asleep. He had lots of muscle spasms and stiffness. So, like I said, at 7 months, he got diagnosed with cerebral palsy. All throughout schooling, he had IEPs, and he was in special education classes. In elementary school, he went to Dan Peterson's, which is a special education school for students with disabilities. And then he attended public junior high and high school at Pleasant Grove Junior High and Pleasant Grove High School. All throughout junior high and high school, he was in the special education class, life skills class, and physical therapy during school. He spent most of his time in special education and would attend some elective courses and general education classes. For those classes, he would go with a peer tutor. His peer tutor would be assigned to him. One of them was actually my sister, because my sister's just 2 years younger than her, so that was a cool experience for her. But he had a lot of assistance during those classes. Like, his assignments were read out loud to him, or he had extended time during assignments and tests. And he was provided during his physical therapy and life skills class. He had to stand in a stander for a certain amount of time. So that was another resource provided to him. There was someone there to feed him every day because he cannot feed himself. Some characteristics of Jordan's disability is he has stiff joints and muscles. He's unable to have full control of his arms, and he cannot move his legs. He has speaking and communication difficulties. He has good grammar, but it's hard for people to understand him because he can't pronounce his words to the fully. So you have to really listen to understand him. He has seizures and, like I said, intellectual disabilities. So he can't necessarily read, write, or do anything kind of like that. But he is the happiest person that I know. He is the kindest person that I know. He loves life, and he really, really loved school. He was the sports manager for the football and baseball team. He loved participating. He was in student council. And if it wasn't for IEPs and special education and life skills classes, he wouldn't have been able to get to know his peers and get involved as much as he did, and that brought him a lot of joy.